The great hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for miles in every direction. A massive chamber carved from the heart of an ancient asteroid that had been hollowed out over thousands of years by species that no longer existed. And on this particular day, representatives from over 300 different alien civilizations had gathered to witness something that most of them considered to be nothing more than a minor administrative matter, the admission of a new species into the galactic community. Humans had come from a small blue world on the outer edge of the Orion Arm, a place so remote and insignificant that most star charts did not even bother to mark it. And yet, here they were, standing before the greatest powers in the known universe, asking politely for the right to travel among the stars and trade with their neighbor's ambassador. Sarah Chun stood at the center of the speaking platform, her dark hair pulled back in a simple style, her posture straight and confident despite the fact that she was surrounded by beings that could crush her world with a single command. She smiled as she finished her prepared remarks, and then she waited for the council to respond. High Arbiter Vexillion of the Concord looked down at the human woman with 4 of his 7 eyes, his massive insectoid body shifting on his throne of living crystal. He had seen thousands of species petition for membership during his long tenure, and most of them blurred together in his memory like drops of water in an endless ocean. The council has reviewed your application, Vexillion announced, his voice translated by the ancient machines that lined the walls. And we find your species to be acceptable for provisional membership in the Galactic Concord. You will be granted limited trading rights, restricted travel permits, and observer status at council meetings for a probationary period of no less than 100 standard cycles. A murmur of approval rippled through the assembly. This was generous treatment for a species so young and so primitive, and many of the older races whispered to each other that humans should be grateful for such kindness. But before Ambassador Chun could respond, something unexpected happened, something that would be remembered and discussed for centuries to come. Though few understood its significance at the time, from the shadows at the edge of the Great Hall, a figure began to move. The elder Kaveth had not spoken in the council chambers for over 3,000 years. He was the last of the firstborn, a race so ancient that they had watched the first stars ignite in the darkness of the young universe. His body was not made of flesh and bone but of pure light, contained within a crystalline shell that hummed with energies older than most civilizations. Every being in the hall fell silent as Kaveth drifted toward the center of the chamber. Even the High Arbiter lowered his gaze in respect, for the firstborn had been old when his own species was still crawling through the mud of their homeworld. Kev stopped before the human ambassador, and Sarah Chun felt a strange warmth wash over her as the ancient being examined her with senses she could not begin to understand. She did not flinch or look away, and something in Kaveth seemed to shimmer with what might have been surprise. "I would speak," Kaveth said, and his voice was like music and thunder and the whisper of solar winds all at once. "The council recognizes the elder," Vexillion said quickly, "and welcomes his wisdom." Kaveth turned slowly, his light shifting through colors that had no names in any language, and he addressed the assembled representatives of 300 worlds with words that would haunt them all. "I have watched 10,000 species crawl from their cradles and reach for the stars," Kaveth began, "and I have seen most of them burn out like sparks from a dying fire. I have witnessed empires that spanned galaxies crumble to dust, and I have seen horrors that would shatter your minds if I spoke of them. In all my long existence, I have learned that the universe cares nothing for the hopes and dreams of those who live within it." He paused, and the silence was so complete that beings could hear the heartbeats of those standing next to them. "But these humans," Kaveth continued, and now his light pulsed with something that looked almost like fear. "These small creatures from their tiny world at the edge of nothing, they are different from any species I have ever encountered. I have studied their history, their wars, their triumphs and their failures, and I have seen something in them that fills me with wonder and with dread. The Dralith Ambassador, a towering reptilian creature covered in scales the color of dried blood, let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "With respect, Elder," he said, his forked tongue flickering, "these humans are barely out of their caves. They fight among themselves like animals. They pollute their own world, and they have only just learned to travel faster than light. What could possibly be so remarkable about such primitive creatures?" Kavith turned to face the Dralith, and for a moment his light blazed so bright that several beings had to shield their eyes. "You ask what makes them remarkable," he said. "Then I will tell you. Humans do not forget. Humans do not forgive." Another murmur ran through the assembly, but this time it was mixed with confusion and amusement. "Every species remembers its wounds," Kaveth continued, "but most learn to move past them, to accept what cannot be changed, to make peace with their enemies when war becomes too costly. This is wisdom, this is survival, this is the way of the universe. But humans are not like other species." He drifted closer to the Dralith Ambassador, who suddenly looked less amused. "Wound a human," Kaveth said, "and they will remember it forever. Wrong them, and their children will be taught to hate you. Their children's children will grow up knowing your name and dreaming of vengeance. They will wait for decades, for centuries if they must, nurturing their grievances like precious flames, planning and preparing and biding their time until the moment comes when they can strike. This is ridiculous." The Dralith Ambassador scoffed, though his voice was not quite as steady as before. "You speak as if these soft little creatures are some kind of threat. They have no fleet, no weapons, no power whatsoever." "Not yet," Kavith agreed, "but they will. And when they do, they will remember every slight, every insult, every injustice they have suffered. So hear my warning. All of you welcome humans as equals and treat them fairly, or leave them alone entirely. Trade with them honestly. Keep your promises, and give them no reason to count you among their enemies." The elder paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper that somehow reached every corner of the vast hall. "But never, never betray them. Never harm their people and expect them to simply accept it. Never make the mistake of thinking that because they smile and speak softly, they have forgotten what you have done. Because humans do not forgive, and they have patience that would make the stars themselves seem hasty." Silence fell over the assembly once more, and for a long moment no one moved or spoke. Then the Dralith Ambassador laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "The elder has grown senile in his old age," he declared, looking around for support. "These humans are nothing weak, short-lived, primitive. In 1,000 years, no one will even remember their name." Scattered laughter joined his, and soon the tension in the hall began to fade. The various ambassadors returned to their private conversations, dismissing the elder's words as the ramblings of an ancient being who had finally lost his grip on reality. Veth said nothing more. He simply looked at Ambassador Chun one last time, and she could have sworn she saw something like sorrow in his shifting light. Then he turned and drifted back into the shadows, leaving the great hall behind forever. No one tried to stop him, and within hours, most of the council had forgotten his warning entirely. Ambassador Chun returned to Earth with news of humanity's acceptance into the galactic community, and celebrations erupted across the planet. Finally, they were part of something greater. Finally, they had a place among the stars. But Sarah Chun never forgot what the elder had said, and sometimes, late at night, she wondered what he had seen in humanity that frightened him so much she would not have to wonder for long. 30 years passed after humanity joined the Galactic Concord, and in that time, the small species from Earth proved themselves to be everything the elder had described and more. They were clever and adaptable, willing to take on jobs that other races considered beneath them. And they spread across the stars with a hunger that surprised even their most optimistic supporters. The colony on Elysium 7 was humanity's proudest achievement. It was a beautiful world with vast oceans and rolling green hills, located in a system that other species had dismissed as worthless. But humans saw potential where others saw nothing. And within 2 decades, they had transformed the planet into a thriving settlement of over 400,000 souls. Families built homes there, and planted gardens and raised children who had never seen Earth. Scientists established research stations to study the unique wildlife. Artists painted the magnificent sunsets that painted the sky in shades of purple and gold every evening. It was, by any measure, a paradise, but paradise never lasts. Especially when it sits upon treasure deep beneath the surface of Elysium 7. UN geologists discovered something that would change everything: the largest deposit of quantum lattice crystals ever found in the known galaxy. These crystals were essential for faster-than-light travel, and whoever controlled them would hold power over the entire galactic economy. News of the discovery spread quickly, and suddenly Elysium 7 was no longer a quiet colony that no one cared about. Suddenly, it was the most valuable piece of real estate in 1,000 light years. Dralith Dominion wanted those crystals more than they had ever wanted. Anything Ambassador Krathvex of the Dralith had never forgotten the day the Elder Kaveth had embarrassed his people in front of the entire council. He had spent 30 years nursing that grudge, waiting for an opportunity to prove that humans were nothing to be feared. And now that opportunity had arrived. Krathvex went to the council with documents that he claimed proved humanity had violated the terms of their membership agreement. He said that the colonization of Elysium 7 had been illegal from the start. He'd presented testimony from witnesses who swore that humans had bribed officials and forged permits. Every single piece of evidence was a lie, carefully crafted. Over years of preparation, the council debated. For less than a day before reaching their verdict, High Arbiter Vexillion, same insectoid being who had welcomed humanity 30 years earlier, announced the decision with no trace of emotion in his translated voice. The council finds that the human colony on Elysium 7 was established in violation of Concord law. All colonization rights are hereby revoked, and the human population will be peacefully evacuated within 30 standard cycles. The planet and its resources will be placed under Concord administration until a proper claim can be established. Everyone knew what Concord administration meant. The Dralith would take control of the crystals and grow rich beyond imagination, while humanity received nothing. Ambassador Chen, older now but no less determined, stood before the council and demanded justice. She presented counter-evidence and called witnesses and pleaded for a fair investigation. But the council had already made up its mind, and nothing she said could change the outcome. "This is theft," she declared, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You are stealing our world based on lies and fabricated evidence. You are condemning 400,000 innocent people to lose everything they have built. Is this the justice of the Galactic Concord?" Krathvex smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "The council has spoken," he said. "We suggest you accept the decision gracefully. After all, you are still a young species, and there is much you can learn from your elders about knowing your place." Ambassador Chun said nothing more. She simply turned and walked out of the chamber. And those who watched her go would later remember the look in her eyes, not despair, not defeat, but something cold and hard and patient. The Dralith did not wait for the 30 cycles to pass. 1 week after the council's decision, a fleet of Dralith warships appeared in orbit around Elysium 7. They did not come with evacuation transports or humanitarian supplies. They came with weapons armed and shields raised. Governor Marcus Webb received their transmission in his office as the sun was setting over the capital city. Krathvek's face filled the screen, his reptilian features twisted into an expression of cruel satisfaction. "You have 6 hours to evacuate your people," Krathvek announced. "Leave everything behind, your homes, your possessions, your research, everything. Board whatever ships you have and leave this system forever. This world belongs to the Dominion now." Governor Webb was 63 years old. He had spent 20 years building Elysium 7 into the thriving colony it had become. He had watched children grow up and get married and have children of their own. He had buried friends in the soil of this world and planted trees in their memory. 6 hours is not enough time, he said, keeping his voice calm despite the fear growing in his chest. "We have 400,000 people here, including elderly and children and patients in hospitals. We need at least 30 days to organize a proper evacuation." "You have 6 hours," Krathvek repeated. "Every human who remains after that time will be considered a hostile combatant and dealt with." Accordingly, the transmission ended, and Governor Webb sat in silence for a long moment. Then he contacted every human ship in the system and ordered them to begin loading as many people as possible. He sent messages to Earth begging for help that he knew would never arrive in time. For 5 hours, the people of Elysium 7 scrambled to escape. Families grabbed what little they could carry and ran for the spaceports. Parents carried crying children through crowded streets. Elderly couples held hands as they waited in endless lines, but there were not enough ships. There had never been enough ships. And when the 6 hours ended, over 390,000 people were still on the planet's surface. Governor Webb sent one final message to the Dralith fleet. "Please," he said, "give us more time. These are innocent people, families with children. They are not soldiers. They are not threats. They are just people trying to live their lives. In the name of whatever you hold sacred, show mercy." Krathvek's response came not in words but in fire. The orbital bombardment lasted 12 minutes. Plasma beams rained down from the sky like the wrath of angry gods, turning cities into craters and forests into ash. The oceans boiled and the mountains crumbled, and the beautiful purple sunsets were replaced by clouds of smoke and dust that would circle the planet for years when it was over. Nothing remained of humanity's proudest colony but a scarred and burning wasteland. 390,000 men, women, and children gone in less time than it takes to eat a meal. The Dralith began mining operations the following week across the galaxy. The news spread like wildfire. Some species expressed shock and horror at the massacre. Others quietly congratulated the Dominion on their decisive action. The Council issued a statement expressing concern and calling for an investigation that everyone knew would lead nowhere in humanity. Humanity said nothing at all. No protests, no demands for justice, no threats of retaliation. Human ambassadors continued attending council functions with polite smiles. Human merchants continued trading as if nothing had happened. Human ships continued traveling along approved routes without incident. The Dralith celebrated their victory and laughed at the species they had so easily crushed. Krathvek was promoted to High Chancellor and given control of the crystal mining operations. He grew wealthy and powerful beyond his wildest dreams, but those who paid close attention noticed something strange. Human shipyards that had been idle for years suddenly began operating at full capacity. Human research stations went dark and stopped communicating with the outside world. Young humans across every colony world began enlisting in military service in numbers never seen before, and on every human world, in every human city, on every human ship. The same 400,000 names were carved into walls and monuments and memorial stones. The children of humanity grew up, learning those names the way other children learned. Nursery rhymes, and they remembered, and they waited. 20 years after the burning of Elysium 7, The galaxy had moved on. The Dralith Dominion had grown into the wealthiest and most powerful empire in the Concord. The quantum lattice crystals from Elysium 7 made them indispensable to faster-than-light travel, and every species that wanted to cross the stars had to pay tribute to the Dominion. High Chancellor Krothvex had become one of the most influential beings in known space, and he used that influence to remind everyone that the Dralith were not to be challenged humanity. Meanwhile, seemed to have accepted their defeat with quiet dignity. Ambassador Chum, now silver-haired and walking with a slight limp from an accident years ago, continued to attend council meetings and diplomatic functions. She smiled and made polite conversation and never once mentioned the massacre. When other species asked about Elysium 7, she would simply say, "We remember," and change the subject. The Dralith took this as proof of human weakness. Krothvex often joked at parties about how easily the primitive apes had been broken. They had their little colony burned to ash, he would say, his forked tongue flickering with amusement, and they did nothing but cry and accept it. This is why some species are meant to rule, and others are meant to serve. His guests would laugh, and the story would spread, and the legend of human cowardice became common knowledge throughout the galaxy. But not everyone was laughing. Merchant Captain Yelix of the Varani Trading Consortium had spent 50 years traveling between star systems, and she had learned to notice things that others missed. It was how she had survived so long in a dangerous business, and she had noticed something strange about the humans. Their shipyards had expanded tenfold since the massacre, but no one could say what they were building. Their research stations had gone silent, their communications encrypted with codes that even the best intelligence agencies could not break. Their young people were enlisting in military academies in numbers that made no sense for a species at peace. One evening, while drinking at a space station bar, Yelix found herself sitting next to a human woman who worked at one of the silent research facilities. The woman had clearly had too much to drink, and her tongue was looser than it should have been. "Do you want to know a secret?" the woman whispered, her eyes unfocused but burning with something that looked like pride. "We have not been sleeping these past 20 years. We have been working. Every scientist, every engineer, every researcher on every human world has been working on one project." "What project?" Yelix asked, her curiosity overwhelming her caution. The woman smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "When the time comes, you will see. Everyone will see. And the Dralith will finally understand what the Elder tried to tell them." She said nothing more. And the next morning she was gone, transferred to a different facility where Yelix could never find her. But the merchant captain remembered that conversation, and she began to watch the humans more closely. She noticed that human children were taught differently than children of other species. They did not just learn reading and mathematics and science. They learned the names of the dead. 400,000 names, memorized and recited like sacred prayers. Every child on every human world could tell you who lived on Elysium 7 and how they died and who was responsible. She noticed that human military training had changed. Soldiers were no longer taught to fight in the open, to engage in the honorable warfare that other species practiced. Instead, they learned patience and stealth and precision. They learned to wait for years before striking. They learned to hit hard and fast and disappear before their enemies could. She noticed that human diplomats never got angry anymore, no matter how they were treated. They smiled through insults and laughed off provocations and made themselves seem harmless and weak. But Yelix had been a merchant long enough to recognize a mask when she saw one day. She worked up the courage to approach Ambassador Chun at a diplomatic reception. The old woman was standing alone by a window, looking out at the stars with an expression that Yelix could not read. "Ambassador," Yelix said quietly, "I have to ask you something, and I hope you will not take offense." Chun turned to look at her, and Yelix was struck by how tired the woman seemed. Tired. but not broken. There was steel beneath that weathered face. "Ask your question," Chun said. "What are you waiting for?" Yelix asked. 20 years, and you have done nothing. You smile and trade and pretend that everything is fine. But I have watched your people, and I do not believe you have simply accepted what was done to you." For a long moment, Ambassador Chen said nothing. She simply looked at Yelix with those dark eyes that had seen so much pain and loss. "Do you know what my grandmother used to say?" Chun finally replied. "She used to say that revenge is a dish best served cold. I was a child when she told me that, and I did not understand what she meant. But I understand now. What does it mean?" Yelix Ashchan smiled, and it was the same smile the woman at the bar had worn, patient and predatory and utterly without mercy. "It means that we are not in a hurry," she said. "The Dralith think we have forgotten. They think we have accepted our weakness and learned our place. This is what we want them to think. Let them grow comfortable and confident and careless. Let them believe that they are safe." She leaned closer to Yelix, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "But we have not forgotten a single name. We have not forgiven a single death. For 20 years, we have been preparing building ships that no one has ever seen, developing weapons that no one can imagine, training soldiers who would die 1,000 times for the chance to avenge their fallen brothers and sisters. When will you strike?" Yelix asked, her heart's pounding with fear and fascination. "When we are ready," Chun said. "When we are certain. When the moment is perfect and the victory is assured. It may be another year, or another decade, or another century. It does not matter. We will wait as long as we must. Time is on our side, and we have learned patience from the stars themselves." She turned back to the window, and Yelix knew the conversation was over. "If I were you," Chun added without looking at her, "I would make sure the Varani stay neutral when the time comes. We have no quarrel with your people, and we would prefer to keep it that way. But anyone who stands between us and the Dralith will be treated as an enemy." Yelix left the reception that night and immediately contacted her government. She told them everything she had seen and heard. She begged them to prepare for what was coming, but no one listened. The Dralith were too powerful. They said the humans were too weak. The idea that humanity could threaten the mightiest empire in the Concord was absurd, and so the galaxy continued to sleep, unaware that in the shadows, a storm was gathering, a storm that had been building for 20 years. Fed by grief and rage, and a cold determination that would not be denied somewhere in the depths of space, in stations and shipyards hidden from prying eyes, humanity finished their preparations, and at last, they were ready. The Dralith called it the Week of Shadows, though it lasted far longer than 7 days, and by the end, the shadows had swallowed their entire empire. Began on what should have been an ordinary morning at the Dominion's largest military shipyard. Commander Thrall was reviewing supply reports when the alarms started screaming. He looked up at the sensor display and saw something that made his blood run cold. Ships were appearing out of nowhere, not from hyperspace, not from any direction the sensors could track, simply materializing as if they had always been there but invisible. Dozens of them, then hundreds, sleek black vessels that did not match any known design. "What are those?" Thrall demanded, his clawed hands gripping the edge of his command console. No one could answer him, because no one had ever seen anything like them. The human ships moved with impossible speed and precision. They danced through the Dralith defensive fleet like ghosts, their weapons carving through shields that should have been impenetrable. In less than an hour, the greatest shipyard in the Dominion was nothing but twisted metal and expanding clouds of debris across the galaxy. The same scene was playing out at 16 other locations simultaneously. 17 military installations attacked at the exact same moment, destroyed before they could even call for help. The coordination required was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It would have taken centuries for most species to plan such an operation. But humanity had spent those years preparing for this single perfect. Strike High Chancellor Krathvex received the news while eating breakfast at his palace on the Dominion homeworld. His aide burst through the doors with scales pale from terror. "Chancellor, we are under attack." The aide gasped. "The humans, they are everywhere. Our shipyards, our weapons platforms, our orbital defenses all destroyed." Krathvex dropped his eating implements with a clatter. "That is impossible," he hissed. "The humans have no fleet capable of such an attack. Our intelligence would have detected any military buildup. There was nothing to detect." The aide replied, his voice shaking. "They built everything in secret, in places we could not find. Their ships use technology we have never seen. They appear and disappear like phantoms." And Chancellor, he hesitated, terror written across his face. "They are not targeting civilians. They are only destroying military assets and hunting specific individuals." "What individuals?" Krathvex demanded, though a cold dread was already forming in his stomach. The aide pulled up a holographic display showing a list of names. Every name belonged to someone who had been involved in the decision to destroy Elysium 7 politicians who had voted for it, officers who had ordered it, soldiers who had carried it out, merchants who had profited from it. Krathvex's name was at the very top. "They have been planning this for 20 years. The aide whispered. "They know everything: who voted for the attack, who gave the orders, who pressed the buttons. They have lists, Chancellor, detailed lists. And they are working through those lists one name at a time." The following days were chaos. The Dominion fleet rallied for a counterattack, gathering every warship they could muster at a secret rendezvous point. But when they emerged from hyperspace, human forces were waiting for them. Somehow, the humans knew exactly where they would be and exactly when they would arrive. The battle lasted 3 hours. And when it was over, the Dominion fleet had ceased to exist. The Dralath High Command tried to flee to a hidden bunker deep beneath their homeworld. Human special forces were waiting for them when they arrived. No one escaped. Admiral Vetches, who had commanded the fleet that burned Elysium 7, was captured alive. He was brought before a human tribunal and confronted with evidence of his crimes, recordings and documents and testimony that proved beyond any doubt what he had done. The tribunal sentenced him to life imprisonment on a barren asteroid, where he would have nothing but time to reflect on his actions. The humans did not execute him. They wanted him to live with his failure, to wake up every morning knowing that his empire had fallen because of what he had chosen to do. By one, the names on the lists were crossed off. Some were captured and tried. Others died fighting. A few managed to escape into the depths of space, where they would spend the rest of their lives hiding and running. But the humans were patient. They had waited 20 years for this moment, and they would wait 20 more if necessary. Every name would be answered for. Every debt would be paid. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session and demanded that humanity cease their military operations immediately. High Arbiter Vexillion, still leading the council, after all these years, declared that the human attacks were a violation of every treaty and law in existence. Ambassador Chun appeared before them one final time, and she was no longer the tired old woman who had smiled through decades of insults. She stood straight and tall, her eyes burning with a fire that made even the mightiest beings in the chamber look away. "For 20 years, we asked for justice," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "We presented evidence of the Drolith's crimes. We begged for investigations and trials and accountability. And what did you give us?" No one answered. "You gave us silence," Chun continued. "You gave us excuses and delays and dismissals. You told us to accept what had been done and move on. You watched 400,000 of our people burn, and you did nothing." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of those who dared to face her. You taught us something valuable, she said. You taught us that in this galaxy, the only law is power. The strong do as they wish, and the weak suffer what they must. We were excellent students. Vexillion shifted on his throne, his compound eyes blinking rapidly. You cannot simply attack a sovereign nation and expect no consequences. Consequences? Chun interrupted, and her laugh was cold and bitter. What consequences do you imagine you can impose on us? Your fleets are no match for ours. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. And every species in this chamber knows that if they stand against us, they will share the Drellith's fate. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Drellith killed our people. They murdered our children and our parents and our friends. They laughed about it and grew rich from our stolen resources. Now we will ensure they never have the strength to threaten anyone again. This is not justice, another ambassador called out. This is revenge. Chung turned to face him, and her smile was like a knife. Perhaps, but it is the only kind of justice you left us. When we are finished with the Drellith, we will withdraw. We will return to our own space and bother no one. But know this, every species in this chamber has witnessed. What happens to those who harm humanity and expect us to simply accept it? She walked toward the exit, and no one moved to stop her. We do not forget, she said over her shoulder. We do not forgive. Remember that, and pray you never give us reason to add your names to our lists. The doors closed behind her, and the council sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Chun was never seen in those halls again. The Drellith Dominion did not fall in a single day or even a single year. It crumbled slowly, like a great tree whose roots had been cut, swaying in the wind before finally toppling to the ground. Humanity kept their word. They did not conquer. They did not occupy. They did not enslave. They simply dismantled the military power that had been used against them, and then stepped back to let the pieces fall where they may without their fleet. The Drellith could not enforce their control over the species they had dominated. Rebellions erupted across their empire as former subjects realized that the Dominion's iron fist had turned to dust. Within 5 years, the once mighty empire had fractured into a dozen squabbling factions, none of them capable of threatening anyone beyond their own borders. The quantum lattice crystals of Elysium 7 were claimed by humanity as reparations. They did not hoard them or use them to gain power over other species. Instead, they established fair pricing and open trade, making faster-than-light travel more affordable for everyone. The galaxy's economy improved, and many species quietly acknowledged that they were better off now than they had been under. Drellith Control High Chancellor Krathvex was captured on a small moon where he had been hiding for 3 months. He was thin and ragged when human soldiers found him, his once proud scales dull and cracked. He did not fight when they took him into custody. There was no fight left in him. His trial lasted 6 months, and every moment was broadcast across the galaxy. Witnesses testified about the massacre of Elysium 7, about the lies and fabrications that had been used to justify it, about the 12 minutes of fire that had ended 400,000 lives. Krathvex offered no defense, because there was none to offer. The tribunal sentenced him to spend the rest of his life on Elysium 7 itself, in a small habitat built among the ruins of the colony he had destroyed. Every day, he would wake up and see the scarred landscape, the craters where cities had stood, the dead forests that would take centuries to recover. Every day, he would be reminded of what he had done. Some said it would have been kinder to execute him. The humans disagreed in the orbit of Elysium 7. Humanity built something new, a massive station that served as both memorial and meeting place. They called it the Hall of Names, and within its walls, the names of all 400,000 victims were inscribed in letters of light that would never fade. Every year, on the anniversary of the massacre, humans gathered at the Hall of Names to remember. They came by the millions from every colony and every world. young and old and everything in between. They read the names aloud, all 400,000 of them, and they renewed their promise to never let such a thing happen again as the years passed. Other species began to join the memorial. First a few curious travelers, then delegations from former Dralis subjects, and eventually representatives from across the galaxy. They came to lay offerings and pay respects, not because they had known the victims, but because they understood what the memorial represented. It represented a promise that some crimes would never be forgotten, and some debts would always be paid. The Galactic Concord was reformed after the war. The old rules that had allowed the strong to prey on the weak were replaced with new agreements that gave smaller species a voice and a vote. It was not perfect, and there were still disputes and conflicts. But the worst excesses of the old order were gone. Humanity was offered a seat on the High Council, the most powerful governing body in known space. They would have a voice in every major decision, influence over the future of the galaxy itself. The declined Ambassador Maya Chen, granddaughter of Sarah Chen, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years after the war, stood before the council to explain humanity's decision. "We thank you for the offer," she said, "and we recognize it for what it is, an acknowledgement that we have earned the right to stand among the great powers of the galaxy. But we must refuse." High Arbiter Nexilian, who had replaced Vexilian after his retirement, tilted his massive head in confusion. "We do not understand. You have won a great victory. You have proven your strength beyond any doubt. Why would you not take your place at the center of galactic power?" Maya smiled, and those who had known her grandmother saw the same steel beneath the surface. "Because we have learned that power corrupts," she said. "We have seen what happens when a species believes it is above consequences, when it thinks it can do whatever it wants without fear of accountability. We do not want to become what we fought against." She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of hundreds of worlds. "We will trade with you," she continued. "We will help when asked. We will defend the innocent when we can, and we will honor our agreements to the letter. But we will never again place our fate in the hands of those who watched our children burn and did nothing." The council accepted humanity's decision, though many did not understand it. In the centuries that followed, humanity became something unique in galactic history, a power that could have ruled but chose not to, a species that had proven its strength but preferred peace, but they never forgot. And they never let the galaxy forget. A new saying spread among the stars, passed from elder to child, from captain to crew, from diplomat to spy. It was taught in schools and whispered in bars and repeated in the halls of power whenever someone considered breaking faith with humanity. "The universe is vast and full of wonders and terrors," the saying went. "But there is no terror like a patient human with a long memory. You may cheat them and think you have won. You may wound them and think they are weak. You may even believe they have forgotten. But they will build monuments to their grief, and in those monuments they will preserve every name and every debt and every promise of vengeance. And then, when you least expect it, when you have grown comfortable and complacent, they will come for you, not in anger, not in haste, but in cold certainty." And so the galaxy learned to treat humanity with respect, not because they feared human weapons or human ships, but because they understood something fundamental about the small species from the small blue world at the edge of nothing. Humans do not forgive humans, remember. And, in the vast darkness between the stars, there is no escape from a species that has all the time in the universe in the Hall of Names. The light continues to shine, and the names continue to be read. And humanity continues to keep their promise, a promise to the dead, a promise to the living, and a warning to all who might someday be tempted to harm them. The elder Kavith had tried to warn them all those centuries ago. He had seen something in humanity that filled him with wonder and with dread. And now, finally, the galaxy understood what he had meant. Some lessons are only learned the hard ways. The Dralith learned too late, and no one who witnessed their fall ever forgot it.